Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to see some folks I haven't seen in a while. I'm glad you're here. I'm going to introduce the panel, and hopefully I won't mess anybody's name up. Just one person's I've been practicing. And then we'll get on with the program. So first person here is Joe Bartholomew. He is from Denver Contracting. He's a contracting officer for this particular action. You have DJ Lavoie. He is the Director Assistant Secretary for REAC. You have Patrick Evans. He is PIH's IT Director. And then you have Terry Holcomb at the end here. He is he's with REAC, and he's our lead trainer and also a subject matter expert on this particular, on the inspections. So just a couple things real quick. If you have any questions, please come up to the mic. We've been instructed to tell everybody that, because this is all being taped. So please come up to the mic if you have any questions. Other than that, let's move forward. DJ?
Thank you, Brian, and good afternoon, everybody. We're glad you're here. A lot of familiar faces that we've seen from way back in the days when the REAC started, and many of you were major contributors in the successes that we have enjoyed. Today is a really important day for all of you and for us, in that we want to share a lot of information about this venture that we are asking you to be partners with. In the world we live in, you notice there was background music. How many times have you been to HUD and sat in chairs and listened to melodic background music? The answer is it never used to happen. It's a new place. We're doing a lot of things differently. We're trying to be much smarter. We're trying to be much more progressive. We want to be more technological savvy. We lead a lot of that effort in the REAC. All of HUD is going in that direction under the Secretary. I'm going to step up to the podium and go through a slide presentation. And because this is all being recorded, A, I'll remind you again, it's all being recorded. And B, we're going to be sharing this with folks who weren't able to make it here today so that everybody has an opportunity to listen to the dialogue. One of the things, and there are many, that we would like to see accomplished today, and that is the opportunity for you sitting in the audience to network. As you hear what we are asking you to consider being partners with us in, you will see that there is a lot of aspects of this that are different from things that we might have done in the past in terms of the way we did our business. And for that reason, we are going to ask all of you to really think hard about all of the ways that you might consider doing this. The gentleman to my right, Joel, a good friend who supports us all the time, is the referee with the whistle. And he is going to keep me and all of the rest of us sitting up here on the straight and narrow, which we have to do in the world we live in. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Joel, and he will give us the rules of the road that we need to adhere to. If he interrupts me or anyone here and says, "Not so fast, big boy," I am not going to take it personally. I'm going to understand that this is something that is not appropriate at this point in time under the rules of the road to be talking about. So that's the way we have to do it. That's the way it is, and I know all of you recognize and appreciate that. So with Joel will share with you the rules, and then we will get going from there.
I just want to welcome everybody and thank everybody for coming out today. I flew in from Denver, so it's exciting for me to come here. This is the first time for me to come visit HUD in DC. So really, I just want to get it out there to begin with that we're really just in the market research phases of this. And we're doing this so that we can let industry know what we're looking at and what we're thinking about doing. And then that way you guys can give us your feedback and we can help to make a better product that's going to meet our needs and help you guys to be able to meet our needs to the best of our ability, right? We have a good framework of what we think and we know what we want, but we want to get feedback so that we can make sure we get the best product on the street for us to get what we need and the best product that's going to work with the way that you guys know are the best ways to do business. So that being said, that because we're in the market research phase, we don't have a lot of things ironed out as far as like evaluation criteria, how we're going to look at that type of stuff. And that will come out later on as we get further on into the solicitation and things like that. So those types of questions I won't be able to answer, not because I don't want to, just because it's still kind of up in the air at this point and we haven't quite nailed that down. So we're more trying to tell what our intent is, give you the opportunity to ask questions when things don't seem clear, so that when it comes out, you'll be able to know. And that's really the only rules that I have for now, unless something happens. So like DJ said, if I interrupt you, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to make sure that we all keep a level playing field and that we don't get ahead of ourselves in the game.
Thank you, Joel. Hit upon a very good point Joel did that I do want to emphasize as I migrate over to the microphone and go through the presentation. We have a business plan that you will see discussed in these slides, and we believe it to be a good business plan. We do not believe it to be the best business plan. The best will only come from listening to what you all have to say and giving us your ideas and thoughts so that we can get to something that is real, and it also is something that we consider all of these aspects to get to a business solution that we believe will work. So for that reason, we are going to be looking for dialogue. That is what the purpose of today is. And once again, to emphasize the fact that it's all being recorded so that everyone can look at this, it's really important. And at the end of each slide, I'm going to stop so that we can make this flow. And I'm going to ask anyone that has a question to go to the microphone, and then let's have that dialogue. Understand that there's proprietary knowledge. Understand that there's people that really know the business and don't want to share ideas. I totally get that. But we will not get the best product possible if we don't share enough ideas to understand that the framework of this is what it needs to be successful. And with that, we'll get started in just a second. The two gentlemen on the left that are there are the subject matter experts. Everybody hear me in the back of the room? Yeah. And the subject matter experts, Terry and Patrick, will definitely be talking to you about the areas that are having to do with the technical aspect, which is a very important component of this, and then the inspection protocols and the ways that this is going to work. So bear with me. We will start with, here we go. I knew we would start off well. Ta-da! If you would look at this, wherever it applies to you and whatever you want to be doing as you look at this, people have asked themselves many times, so what is HUD doing? Good question. In this particular case, we are laying this out in the format that you see on this particular slide because we want everyone to see a full expression of the dialogue. I am not going to insult your intelligence and stand here and read to you word for word what this says. We just want everyone to be able to see what this particular component is. This contract action is an indefinite quantity contract, as you can see that is spelled out there clearly what that means, with a 12-month baseline and for 12 months afterwards, i.e. 5 years. The type of inspections that we're looking at doing are also listed right below it, and we're going to talk about some of these as we go down the road. But the first block of work that we would be asking you to do is that of conducting HQS inspections, housing quality standards. Those particular inspections are what the current protocol calls for the voucher program that is done around the country. I'll digress for a second for some of you that may not know specifically how that's different, because you can see the rest of it is there, UPCS, UPCSV, which we will talk about in a few minutes more specifically, and then you see White House, United States Department of Agriculture, IRS, and other quality standards that are out there. So here's this menu. Many of you have been involved from day one on what we affectionately called UPCS. You're very, very familiar with it. You work through the first version, you work for 2.3, you're looking and working with 4.0, which is our current version. Some of you may be very experienced in HQS, housing quality standards. The basic difference is that the inspection protocol, for those that are familiar or not familiar, is a list of 79 items, all pass-fail, and it is a 100% inspection. And what I mean by that is that all the units have to be inspected. So the business rules that go through that are ones that are much different of the sampling methodology that we use for UPCS. Much different. Why are we doing all this? We're doing it because we want to ensure that no matter if you live in voucher program, brick and mortar, or whatever, that the standards for the people that live there meet the statutory requirement of decent, safe, and sanitary. And to get to that realm, we have to be doing a better job of looking at those standards to make sure they're being enforced. So I've covered the first slide. Is there any specific questions on that slide? And you don't have to raise your hand, just migrate toward the microphone, and we will take the question and then go to the next set. I see no migrations, okay? Let's go to the next slide. Well, that was good. That was the next slide. There we go. Why are we doing this? Continuing. As we look at a number of issues that I just talked about a minute ago, one of the things that we have to do right now from a management decision and other direction is to initially complete 10,000 HQS inspections. We have done about 1,000 of these in-house to get the process down to the point that we are very comfortable with the way that we would require it to be done. And what we would then be asking in some of the initial task orders, once we have these contracts in place, would be to continue this effort along with additional inspections that would follow. The next particular component that you see there describing answering the question of why speaks to delivering together, which was an internal HUD initiative, looking at the broad spectrum of areas that we ask different rules to be followed in terms of housing authorities, and realizing that we need to do a better job internally coordinating what those activities need to look like. We put together a project of delivering together, and one of the things that I just kind of touched upon a minute ago is we want to have a single standard for all of the HUD properties, regardless of the program by which they are funded. The next bullet is basically looking at that area that we refer to affectionately as the White House Initiative. What that was about is that we have in the world of tax credits the UPS standard for the IRS. Everybody, I would assume, is familiar with the tax credit process. And there is a requirement every 3 years that the properties be inspected during the life of that tax credit, be it 4 or 9%. And the IRS wants to be able to audit that information. At the same time, the state HFAs are the ones that receive the tax credit funding. They are responsible for conducting the inspections. So an unintended consequence in the past was that we had inspectors, because it was 3 different entities, state HFA, the mortgagees, and HUD, all with a vested interest. We would sometimes unintentionally show up within days of each other to all conduct the same inspection. Not necessarily in the best interest of the citizenry, and also not the most cost-efficient or effective way of doing business. So what the White House Initiative has been about, and we're now going into our 3rd year, is to get to a single inspection. And it's working very, very well. We did a very small pilot in the first year, a smaller pilot, and now in this year, FY14, we are doing the larger pilot. We have 27 states that are online to be able to do this with us, some very large states, New York, Texas, California, etc. The scale is relatively small at this point because we're still working through the protocols of exchanging information, but I think all of you that have been in the business for a while understand that where this can go is very, very large, and that if we found the REAC, HUD, inspecting as the primary source for all of these or a lot of these particular state tax credit deals during the life cycle of this, there's an awful lot of work involved in doing that. It would be to the UPS standard. That is what we're looking at when we talk about the White House Initiative. The contract service part there in the last bullet basically talks to, once again, the fact that we've got an awful lot of properties, an awful lot of things that are going on, and that we need to do a better job of the scheduling component, et cetera, because I think all of you can appreciate this. We all live in a home of some sort, and we all have busy lives. The same thing applies to people that live in assisted or affordable housing. We want to be able to provide them the common courtesy of the 2-week notice. We want them to be able to understand that we want to come in and look at the property at least once, et cetera, et cetera. So trying to get this all down to something that works and is manageable is one of the mandates, working with the White House and working with the other initiative we're doing that we might want to darn sure works correctly. That's the end of that slide. Any questions? I'm doing pretty good so far, or not. All right. Let's see if I can get the button right. There we go. The next slide, 4, for those that are following along digitally or looking up at the screen, starts talking to the nuts and bolts of what this will look like. And what you see underlined very carefully is the word anticipated. That is our current thinking. That is the current numbers that we're looking at. So we're thinking right now, looking at what's on the horizon and the work that we have to do, that we would see something in the magnitude of 8,000, somewhat of a floor, and it could go as high as 50,000 in terms of a ceiling. I would tell you that those numbers are based upon a lot of pencil and sharp pencil and paperwork. They're subject to change, hence the word anticipated, but it gives you a sense of the kind of volume that we're talking about that we would be doing under these proposed actions that we're now talking about today. I've already talked about resident notification. I keep reinforcing it. It's something that makes the HQS component a little bit difficult for us, and that's part of what we're going to describe as we go through this. But it's something that we have to work through in that the way the HQS inspections have to be conducted, which I'll touch upon. The third bullet is that one of the big changes that we're going to be talking about is that we're using HUD certified inspectors trained in the appropriate tool now. And we're going to talking about how we're going to be shifting those responsibilities as we go forth to the model that we are proposing. We're looking at the fact that you're going to be having to do this on the somewhat similar protocols down to the property level, et cetera, and I think you all understand what that means. The discrepancies and the other components adds a new dimension, and you see the word digital camera image. An initiative that we have in place that we have used for our first 1,000 HQS inspections, and we're going to be coming to you with that particular requirement at the appropriate time, not necessarily right in the very beginning, is that we are going to be asking for the capability to be able to take pictures, which software today, right down to your handheld telephone, and many practitioners already do, of certain levels of discrepancy so that we have a much stronger record and a much stronger case when necessary as to the condition of the property. A picture is worth 1,000 words. And one of the things we find many times is that people don't necessarily understand a mark of a particular discrepancy, but the picture that accompanies it makes it a very clear and very distinct observation and changes the whole game, whether it is a housing authority dealing with a owner and the condition of the property, or it is HUD as the federal regulator dealing with a PHA or a multifamily entity to easily demonstrate this is what we see, this is what it looks like, and I think we can get to acknowledgement, if not consensus, in fairly short order with that capability. Inspection data, et cetera, that we're looking at here to the tools and the secure system components. This word that I have there is PASS, the property assessment subsystem. All of you are very familiar. What that really refers to is that it's all going to stay within the confines of PASS, but the actual dynamics of that are going to change as we go along, just driven by the fact that we have to change our business model. Any questions or comments?
I would like to say something.
Please do, Joel.
Yeah, so when we're talking about anticipated values, and we spoke about in the beginning about an IDIQ, we're anticipating doing a multiple award IDIQ so that we would compete the inspections depending on how they come down. If they come down in a set of 8,000, or, you know, that will be worked out in the solicitation when we're establishing the IDIQs, but we're anticipating having multiple award IDIQs where we would have several different companies, and then from that we would compete the actual actions for the inspection. So in this phase, we're talking about when we're setting up the IDIQ, and then for the actual inspections, those are anticipated right now, mins and maxes that we think would go under the IDIQ, but would be competed under the awardees of the IDIQ. So I just want to make sure that that was clear for you guys.
No, I appreciate that, and I would clarify for all of you, it's not likely that we would say, here, go do 8,000 inspections. They will be broken down into much more digestible chunks, but I mean, thank you for that clarification. It's an important point. Yes, sir.
And my question is right in line with what you're talking about here. We're talking about 8,000 to 50,000 inspections. In the HQS world, that would be 8,000 dwelling units. In the REAC world, that would be 8,000 entire communities with a, sample.
It's an astute observation, yes.
So could we address whether we're talking about 8,000 dwelling units, or is this a mix of some HQS style and some UPCS style where there's a sample?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. So is this all, as I said earlier, remember HQS is at the unit level, or is this all projects? And just as you observed, it's a combination. So think of those as particular contract actions, to Joel's point, that we'll be breaking down to digestible, and I mean as in manageable quantities. It wouldn't be go do 8,000 units, perhaps, but it would definitely be something where we would take, based upon the geography, based upon the cost, there's a bunch of things involved from an internal reason, that we would break it down to that. We don't foresee combining HQS and UPCS in the same task order. It would be a distinct task order for each one, because there's a certain set of requirements to go for each one. So you would see the HQS unique, you would see the UPCS unique, and then following on from that point. Yes, sir.
Yeah, actually, Joel's comment prompted a question, which, do you foresee these solicitations being best qualified, lowest qualified, or a mix, or?
We anticipate going out in the initial solicitation for the IDIQ as a best value trade-off process, where we're going to look at things as past performance and different technical approach and stuff like that. And then hopefully we want to do the actual inspection task orders as like a lowest price technically acceptable type of action, or that will process may kind of evolve as we go through doing task orders. But the IDIQ process will be a trade-off process.
Good answer. You know, I made it. No, it's a good answer. I made a slight faux pas, and I'm going to correct it right now. Here I am asking to enhance networking, and I have not done an important step in that regard, and that is this. I would like each of you to stand up, starting in whatever order. We'll start right here, and give us your name, the company you represent, and any other salient points that you'd like to share. Short, please. Sir. And you don't have to go to the microphone. Thank you.
My name is Matt Gilson. I'm with Gilson Software Solutions. We specialize in developing applications for UPCS, EQS, and MLR.
Thank you, Matt.
I'm with CGI, and we offer inspection services and software that go with that.
Thank you.
And Jim Brown with CGI, work with Thanos with inspection services.
Saul Himmelstein with the inspection group. We do physical needs assessments, mainly inspections in the UPCS and HQS world. And that's about it.
Been doing it for a long time.
Michael Hand, also with the inspection group, and much smaller firm, REAC Solutions, primarily UPCS inspections and consulting, compliance consulting for owners, managers, and training in that topic.
Thank you.
I'm Ed Kramer. I'm with Building Inspection Service, commonly known as BISCO in the industry, one of the original REAC contractors on the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sanjay Shah of Paragon Management Group. We are an Indian firm providing management and financial management consulting services. And
Thank you. Let's go start. Jamie? Yes, ma'am. We'll do that whole section and then we'll come back up to the row. Go ahead. Thank you. Rose? Can barely, yes, sir. Okay. Thank you. Let's come back to the second row. Thank you.
I'm bringing to the system program manager with REACT.
Yeah, good on Gordon Hay, American Consultant Solutions.
Kingsley O'Brien, NIS, Application Development, IT Solutions, and Program Manager.
Nicola Presta, T-Mobile Business Solutions.
Phyllis, T-Mobile Business Solutions.
Thank you.
David Cassell with Property Insight. We've been providing inspection services for REAC since 2003.
I'm Matt Hunter from EMG. We do physical needs assessment, energy audits for public housing and a number of other type of areas. I'm Bill Champion, EMG. I'm Bob Mayberry from CWIS. We're a field service management contractor. They've done several other types of inspections.
Thank you.
Michael Hudd, CCR Associates. We do housing choice voucher program management, including HUS inspections.
Randy Waldeck with CSDA from the West Coast, and we've done assessments and inspections for other types of programs. Here to help.
Thank you.
I'm Daniel Spillman. I'm with Paris Consulting. We're a graduate of the 8A program. We do energy audits and property needs assessments for various federal agencies, including HUD.
Okay.
I'm Fatima Damani from ST Group. We're a small 8A firm. We recently completed a contract in the Office of Contractor and Housing with Section 8 looking at appraisal reviews, and just here to learn more.
Thank you.
Eric Ballinger with Millsap Ballinger and Associates. I'm not my partner.
Josh Millsap's also with Millsap Ballinger Associates. We make inspection software for the public sector. It's examprogramming.com. And work with DC government here doing their inspections. Thank you.
Thank you. The lights are shining. Yes, ma'am. The lights are shining bright, so if I'm squinting, it's not. Go ahead.
I'm Nicole Hatch from Expedient. I'm the face behind the email Gmail. We did a REAC contract since 2017.
Thank you.
For who's REACT UPCS training team.
I think, yeah, let's go right here. Yes, sir.
My name is Michael Wright. I'm with Faithful and Gould. We're a large business. We do social condition assessments across the federal government, across the U.S.
Let's finish off this sector. Yes, sir.
Jason McDermott with the Institute for Building Technology and Safety, a nonprofit organization that does housing inspections, quality control, quality assurance.
Okay.
Andrew Reamer, Federal RIO Consulting, moving on small business, focused on real estate asset management, valuations, and oversight.
Thank you. Scott.
Scott Shikoda from REAC, working on the to align inspection programs across the
Let's see, right there. Yes, sir.
Tom Walner, Arcade Design. I'm here representing a group of small businesses with facilities inspections, energy auditing, and IT management backgrounds.
Hi, Chris Opnick from Computerized Companies. We're a service disabled veteran small business and asset management, field services, broker
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mindy D'Angelo with First Pick, and we have a variety of contractors. We have a variety of contracts with office connecting and housing for the last 15 years.
Thank you.
George Bannon, also with First Pick, providing technical assistance and training to housing authorities.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Anna. I represent Notion Enterprises. We are a asset management field services company. We hold a number of contracts with field services for inspection.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Don Rakestraw, representing T&M Enterprises. We're a veterans
Jason Coleman, National Vendor Management Services, also NVMS, we do inspection services, document information services, and contracts with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Thank you.
Scott Bridgeworth, U.S. Housing Consultants. We do tax credit consulting and UPCS inspections.
Thank you.
Denise Stickney, Microsoft.
Thank you.
Sean Carlson, Microsoft.
Thank you. Is there anyone I missed? I think we got everybody. Okay. I should have done that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I have to step out for a second. My name is Anna Rice. I'm with C3 Systems. I'm the project manager for fast training and also the reverse auction program.
Thank you. You can hear from everybody's introductions, self-introductions, and the different firms that they're a part of that we have a tremendous wealth of knowledge and experience in the room. And once again, one of the intended consequences of this industry meeting is to enhance and encourage the networking necessary to get to the solution. So there will be lists of people, I think, that Joe will be looking at. I think we provide that, do we not, of all the attendees?
We haven't really, but the webcast is going to be recorded there, and we can talk through
Okay.
whether we're going to provide.
And so everybody can see what the contact
Well,
information
and,
would
and
look
everybody can kind of, I don't really want to give out other people's emails to everybody else. So if you want to connect with somebody, probably connect now, because
Okay.
I don't want to,
All right.
I'd rather you make the connection than me send it out and you yell at me for having everybody email you all the time.
Okay, we'll follow the rules, but we'll make sure that all of you have the opportunity to connect in the way that makes the most sense. Did I see a hand?
That was along my line of questions after me. I was wondering whether it was possible to have just the name of the company that you shared, not the email.
Can we do that? Put a list of everybody that was here?
We can talk afterwards, and I'll figure something out. We also have a way for people online to submit questions. So if we have any questions that we don't get answered that we feel we need to answer, I'll post an amendment to the posting for the industry day that has any other questions, and we'll talk through with our
But what they're
general
looking for
counsel
is
and stuff.
contact information.
Right, yeah. So I'll figure out a way that we can do it to where everybody will be okay.
I have a suggestion. We attended another agency, USAID's, industry networking event. They actually ask vendors and they willingly share, not only name, but contact info. In fact, it encourages this.
Well, so maybe we can have you like initial next to your name on the way out if you want to be on there. And
Oh, I
if
see
you
what you're
don't,
saying,
then that
yes.
way we'll cross you out and then
Yes.
we'll do it like that.
Privacy Act.
Does that work?
Yeah.
If, okay, how about that? We'll do it by exception. If you don't want your information to be shared, go and tell at the registration on the table, Rose will be out there. Okay, so on the way out, Rose will be out there. You can let her know. She'll mark you off the list, and we'll send out the list to everybody else. Does that work?
For everybody?
Good.
Okay.
All right.
Good. Slight interruption, but we had to be sure we did that. So we are at that point now of expected capabilities, and we're going to the next slide. Let's see, no. I didn't cover, no. Okay, so we're on page 5, which I have to change. Maintaining to accept, et cetera. I started talking earlier, and I probably should go back to it, and I'll discuss it just briefly. Probably good a point as any. What would be the successor to UPCS, or excuse me, to HQS as we look at this? And, well, I'll tell you what, let me cover it in the next slide. It'll be easier that way. So I'll stay with this format. And you can see that we're talking now about how this would work. So envision that we would expect you to be using the protocols you know, which is UPCS. You would be using HQS. I'll describe what UPCSV looks like in a couple minutes. And then we would talk about any other protocols that would evolve, and there are some that other agencies are looking at that we might have a requirement, particularly because of the White House initiative, to be involved in. They would not be something that not everybody, I mean, everybody would have the opportunity to use that protocol should we put that in place. But what we're telling everybody, this is not just what we've done in the past, which is primarily UPCS inspections. It's a broader menu of the type of inspections that we want to see. You can see reading this, maintain the capability, and I apologize, I'm going to read this first one because this is really a difference, to accept and transfer detailed inspection information and inspection results. That is going to look something like this. Currently, in our reverse auction, we maintain the entire system on the inside of the HUD firewall. What will be different, as we're envisioning, and we do really want to hear your feedback, for a number of reasons, many having to do with capacity internal to us, what we are looking at, and also for the quality assurance responsibilities, we're looking at a much different model in that the task order would be issued, the awardee would then have a specific time period, as we normally do right now, that they would have to conduct these inspections. But what's much different, rather than the process going on within our domain, is that your domain would be that which would be controlling the process going forward. So we would give you, let's say for conversation's sake, the 500 addresses of the places we wanted inspected. And from that point on, it would be held within your infrastructure, preferably cloud, that would be there, and you would be doing the scheduling, you would be conducting the inspections, you would be responsible, as it reads here, for the quality assurance, etc., with us having the ability to continuously monitor for quality inspection purposes. But the thing that is really different is that you are conducting the entire process on your servers, your infrastructure. We would then see a completed product that we would, at our time in choosing, but obviously understanding prompt payments, etc., we would then be going into your particular site, and we would be pulling that information to do our QA and also be ready for the invoices that would be coming, and we'll be talking about payment later. So the entire process would then be resting, if you would, with those firms that were on the list and the ones that are competing for these task orders. Much different than what we have done in the past. It has with it a lot of responsibilities, but we are asking in this case to be sharing responsibilities much more than we do currently in our reverse auction mode. For those that have been with us for a long time, this is very similar in many ways to what we had done in the past in terms of particularly the quality assurance and the particular aspects of the inspection to be done by that contract entity that in fact is conducting the inspection. I'm giving you that overview, but you can see the web-based database. I've already touched that point. We're also looking that we can get to it anytime, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The quality assurance I kind of touched upon. I can't emphasize it much more than that. We'll talk about the training aspects in a couple minutes. But the quality assurance component has to do with the qualifications of the individual who is conducting the inspection. It has to do with the quality of the inspection itself. Basically, you're certifying that you are sending us a good inspection. And that's basically what changes from what we've done before. I generated some questions. That's good. Yes,
Just
sir.
need a tiny clarification. You have maintain the capabilities to accept. Does it mean create and maintain, or does it mean maintain? Are you going to provide the basic digital framework to, in other words, are you just going to like take your current scheduling capabilities and move them over where we maintain them, or do we have to develop from scratch?
Why don't you take a shot at that? I'm gonna, my IT expert, yeah, and it's a good question.
I think the view that we're taking is that, say we award you 500 HQS inspections.
we would provide you the details of what addresses those are, what protocol we're going to be using, etc. From that, and you would have a time frame that will be done in, whatever that time frame is. From that point on, you would be responsible for working with the property agents to be able to schedule when they're going to be scheduled. So we're going to provide you the raw data of which are the properties that you are going to be inspecting, their addresses and so on. But from that point on, you would be responsible for scheduling which of your employees would be doing that, working with property agents, maintaining that. We would have the ability to be able to pull that information at any point to say, we can look at, you're going to be doing 1 First Street next Thursday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and this inspector is the inspector that's going to be doing that.
But will there be, like right now, you have to download the profile for the REAC inspections?
Yes.
For REAC inspections, let's just say, for HQS, I could see where if they're just using a form, there's no need to download, if that's a guess. But for REAC, as far as the infrastructure to download, the property profiles and to re-upload them, we have to create that whole infrastructure, or we'll continue to use HUD?
We are going to provide the property profiles for you,
But that's it, so,
but that will be it.
so we have to come up with a way to upload and download the
Yes.
profile?
So
Okay.
we will provide you the 500 property profiles and the time frame and the protocols you're going to be using, but after that, it's your responsibility to schedule, etc., and maintain that information in a way that we can obtain that information when we need it.
And to that point, it's a great question. So we're sharing with you that, and there's two sides to this. We could say, here's all the software, use it. Well, that has its limitations in itself, because we know there are better solutions out there. So we're saying, this is what we want the business model to look like. You schedule, you do all the things. We're going to tell you the properties. From that point on, you own the process. We want to see the finished product that we can retrieve, check for quality, and pay you on. That's what's different.
So even, let's say for UPCS, we'll have to come up with our own inspection software from scratch, or,
Well, the 4.0 is, if I understand your question, you're still going to use 4.0 when it's
Okay.
UPCS.
okay.
And I'm going to talk about HQS in a second. I didn't do a real thorough job on that, so that might be a little bit of confusion. But yeah, you're going to own the process from the time you are awarded. You'll be given all the information, everything you need to be able to conduct the inspections, and then you will do all of the inspections, scheduling the entire process, and give us a finished product that we'll retrieve to do quality assurance and pay on.
Yeah, again, I mean, sorry to keep asking. So we have to create our own version of CIDR, basically, and
That's what we want to hear, because
Right.
that's part of this dialogue today. I'm giving you the
Right.
way we're looking at doing this. but-
right.
I think you're thinking more of the way that we want to be able to retrieve the information.
Yes.
We don't care how we get the information, but the protocols and everything that's required to be done through the inspection, we're going to give you all the protocols, everything that needs to be done. How you store the information and make it accessible to us so that we can quality check what was completed, we're not going to really get deep into that IT part of it, just that we need to have the ability to access the pictures and things like that when we're requested to show the information and for us to QC it. So I don't think we are thinking, or I don't think it's in the mindset of what we're anticipating of actually having to develop something to do that. If there is a requirement to actually develop the software, then we may need to think through it a little more, because I don't think that's really what we're looking at trying to do, correct? Yeah, so we're not trying to get you to develop a system to go out and do the inspections and stuff. We're going to provide the protocols. The IT portion of more of what we're looking for is to be able to have the images and the data stored so that we can pull it whenever we need to, and it's accessible to us. But not that we don't want to create a situation in where you're having to develop an entire software system in order to handle it. So that's kind of why we're having this conversation, to make sure that's not what our intentions would require. So you're saying that by saying that, you think you would have to develop a system in order to do the inspections?
Well, actually, the way you have it, I wouldn't think that because you say maintain, but I just want to make sure you didn't mean create and
Yeah, yeah.
maintain.
No, yeah.
Okay.
We're thinking that we would do the inspections, protocols and all that stuff, hand that out. The only part that would be kind of in the air that we'd be looking at in the solicitation and establishing the IDIQs and stuff would be how we're going to be able to access that information once someone goes out to the addresses that we've said physically does the inspection, inputs the data into whatever mechanism it is for us to access it, then we're able to look at it. Does that make sense, or did I make it
Yeah, I mean,
less
still
clear?
the one thing I'm not clear on, so
Okay.
pass 4 is going to go away or it's not going to go away?
4.0?
Yeah,
It's a good question, and the answer is it's not going away. That is the current version, the current
Right.
protocol that we're utilizing for UPSC inspection. So we're not envisioning changing 4.0, and I'm going to talk to standards in another slide that goes on. I mean, if that helps your quandary or your question. 4.0 remains 4.0. That's the standard to which we expect the inspections to be conducted to. I think what we're trying to frame here is that the entire process from the time that the task order has been awarded will be that individual entity that has been awarded that. They will be responsible for everything from conducting and notifying, and all the things that we now do through our software will be done by that particular entity, and they will be responsible for giving us a finished product that we can access, not a force feed. We will pull, not a push. We will pull it and then make sure we check it for QA and do the prompt payment necessary to make sure that we pay on time.
yeah, I mean, there's still a gap in there, you know, because,
Can I chime in here? So, at the moment, when you have a reverse auction, you pull down 1 or 2 or 3 inspections at a time. So an inspector will pull down the inspection, will schedule it through our system.
well, you know, just as the case may be, we do all that separately and just sync our systems, but.
Yes.
But still, the bottom line is they're getting it from HUD system, the actual framework for the inspection.
Okay, so you will receive the framework, but instead of seeing 1 or 2, however many you win, you're going to get all those in one big.
Okay, well, that's how we did it during
Okay.
the early
Okay.
days of REACT.
All right.
So, yeah.
Right.
So then you're going to work out with the property owner, with the tenants,
Yeah,
to do the
all
inspection.
that I understand.
You're going to perform the inspection. You're going to review those inspections on your own system,
Okay,
okay? Once that review and that QC process is complete, then we will be able to pull that completed inspection, because if you're in the middle of QCing it, we don't want to, we don't want to pull something that you're actually in flight with. So once you have a completed inspection, we can then pull all 500 back at one time, or we can pull however many we've got at one time, rather than you pushing them back to us as you currently do. And then we will perform our own work on that. So you will be holding the inspection results on something more than just the current handheld that you do today. That's what we're envisaging. Okay. That you will be having a review process and a scheduling process on your side for those inspections, rather than using our software to do that.
okay,
That answer the question?
Does that help?
right, yeah.
What I'm getting is, and Ed agrees, his question is, are you expecting us in this process to create a whole new original IT infrastructure to complete this task?
You need to have that. I'm not expecting that. What I'm saying is you need to have that capability to be a part of this, because that's what's going to require.
Well, a
The
way
word
to
new, the
store.
word, there's other entities out there that have this. So
Right.
however it works, you need to have that capability to be in this particular process we're describing.
I'm sort of in discussion mode now, which is, so I still see we'll download from CIDR, but we'll have to create the ability to review the uploads, but we don't upload them to you, we keep it after the upload and then send it to you a different way.
Yes, so
Okay.
we envisage setting a much more industry standard approach for the inspection. So we're going to have a set of protocols. We have a product that we do, but that would not be the only product that could be used, as long as you there are a set of governing rules that say you have to inspect it in a particular way. If you wish to use a different product that you have, as long as it complies with those protocols, that will be your choice.
Okay.
So you could use that, and then we would transfer it back to us in an industry agreed format.
Okay, thank you. Good questions.
I'm
Yes,
gonna-
sir.
I'm going to spin off on your industry format. Is it possible when you provide the 500 inspections or whatever, that you do it in like a standard format, like a PIC file? Since our scheduling module now, we can obtain that information, then we schedule through there. Are you going to have a standard format for it?
Yes, we're looking at more than just a HUD format. I know other areas within HUD, when they deal with properties, use things like MISMO standards, or they use NEAM standards, or they use geographical standards. We'll be looking at getting feedback from you if which of that type of standard or which combinations of those standards would be the most appropriate for this type of information.
We currently pull all of them in, so.
Yes, so we will be looking at those type of standards
Okay.
that apply across other areas, rather than try and sort of develop
Including
a,
USDA, et cetera.
yes, so we don't have a REAC or a PIH or a HUD, unique standard. We try and make use of what has already been developed.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I've got a couple of questions. Number one, under the IDIQ, do you have a sense as to how many firms you're looking to place under that vehicle? And then secondly, do you envision any kind of small business carve-outs, and if so, what type? And lastly, to address the
Can we do them one at a time? Because
I don't want
it's
to
Friday afternoon and we're already overwhelmed.
They're in my head, so I don't want to forget.
I'm gonna let you do the first one, Joel.
Okay, so the first one is, we anticipate right now, what we're thinking is 3 to 7, but it would really depend on the type of response that we get to it, the evaluations that we go through and stuff like that. But that's kind of the range that we're doing, because we want to look at our minimums and maximums. We want to ensure that there's enough work that everybody would be able to do stuff and stay interested and things like that. But we don't want to have a small number so that people are overwhelmed by the volume. So we're trying to find that kind of sweet spot, and it's really going to depend on what kind of response we get to the actual solicitation. As far as the set aside, nothing is really, this is still part of the market research process. And there's a good chance that we're going to go back out with another RFI after this, after we've refined our requirements a little more based off these discussions and things like that, to ensure that what we all discuss in here and how this changes our frame of thinking from a contracting and program side, that we incorporate kind of this dialogue that we're having there and see when we go back out. So it's going to be good to, when that comes out again, to respond to that so that you can give us your input in that information too, because we'll be looking for more information to make sure we've kind of sharpened our pencils based off of this and our previous RFI and things like that. Okay, and then you had another one.
Right, the last question is, in terms of file storage, would SharePoint be acceptable for this type of engagement?
We are looking more to exchange data. We are looking at more industry standards, so service-oriented architecture, web services, much more of an industry standard to exchange data between business to business or business to government. So we are looking more in that than sort of a Windows proprietary format. Okay. We're not trying to specify a particular software vendor or a particular hardware vendor. We're looking at something that would be much more just an industry standard, and if you wish to do it on an iPad or an Android or a tablet or a Raspberry Pi, as long as you can do that, and as long as you meet the protocols and the standards, we wouldn't be basically dictating which hardware or software platform you use. It would be more of a set of protocols and a set of standards, and we'd be looking at that.
And it'll probably come down to something that will go into our evaluations on the solicitation of. We're going to put those protocols and standards that we need into there. You're going to come up with whatever you think is going to be the best way to deliver it. Then we're going to look at that and see if you know, based on our technical criteria, if we think that that's going to meet, or, you know, those types of things. So that kind of thing, we're not going to step out and say, we need you to do this. We want to get away from doing those types of things, and we want to move to you telling us what you think is going to work best, and us think through it on the technical evaluation side, and determine how we think it'll work too.
Thank you.
Great questions, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So to that point, you know, I'm assuming, I'm starting with the basis that whatever this is, whether it's commercial off-the-shelf software or something we need to build to maintain this database, you know, there's going to be some cost involved. So no matter how minimal. So my question is, as a part of the IDIQ, will the firms just need to show you a plan for that? Or is it something that we have to have, you know, ready to rock and roll on, you know, at the time that we submit the RFP?
So when we do the IDIQ, we'll have that guaranteed minimum. So probably whatever portion of that minimum we do on an IDIQ will either go to developing that infrastructure, or we have the requirement for inspections already right now in place that we need to get done. So it's really going to depend on how the timing of all this works out, of the solicitation coming out and all that, how we would do that. But it would be something that we would anticipate either doing under that minimum requirement that we're required to do of the IDIQ, would be developing that platform or getting it in place or whatever. Or with the first task order, if we break up the inspection requirement where we have 10,000, we've already done about 1,000 of them ourselves. Depending on the timing of it, we will break it up or we haven't worked through the logistics completely of how that would work. So it would fall somewhere in that time framework, but I can't really specifically answer it.
So we'd have to have something ready to go at the time that we submit the RFP, or?
Not necessarily. It would be something that we would evaluate. I wouldn't say that you would have to have your systems in place by the time we're evaluating the proposals and stuff like that, but you would have to have some sort of plan of how it was going to work, and then we would expect not too long after the IDIQs were awarded that it would be working it in place or in the capacity of.
Because the concern is obviously if you're not one of the 3 to 7 awardees of the IDIQ and you've already put something in place.
Right, and that's why I would say I wouldn't expect you to develop something just for a proposal, because then you may be holding something with nothing to do with it and no money to show for it.
Right, let's hope not. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'd like to move away from the IT part, because I think that's like real
Thank
easy.
you.
And I want to talk about personnel and field on the ground, feet on the ground, actually. The first phase looks like it's emphasis on HQS QC inspections. Correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, what are we trying to accomplish here? Are we talking about, because we need to know the logistics. Are we talking about doing the QC inspections that housing authorities are required to do internally and replacing that aspect of it? Or are we doing QCs basically on their QCs?
Great question. And
Or
I
are we
should-
dealing with just troubled agencies?
I understand, and it's a great question, and I should have covered it earlier and I didn't, but let me do it now with this prompt. What we are doing in this first round of 10,000 HQS inspections, with many more to follow, most likely, for those that read the budget, what we are doing is checking two things. We are checking for the condition of the property to the HQS inspections, and we are also checking as to the conduct of the inspection by the parties that are doing. What that requires is that you, the individual inspector, boots on the ground to use your words, would be simultaneously doing that inspection with the PHA, the entity, contractor, or employee of that's doing it.
A follow along.
You're going with them, is the way that we have done this. Now, we are certainly willing to listen to something that may be a concern, but what we have found in the 1,000 plus that we have done, it worked fine. And the main reason is, remember what's different in this case, we're doing 100% on that given time period. So because it's not a sample, which complicates things a little bit in terms of, from your own experience, if that particular housing authority on the 1st of February and they have to do these, particularly the large housing authorities, which is where we're focusing to start with, are doing 100 a day, which is what it takes if they have a large program. Then on the days that you schedule, and we're not going to tell you which days to go, we're going to tell you what we want for an outcome. That would be the days that you would accompany that particular inspector, and you would make your own set of observations, checking for two things. A, your own set of observations as to the condition of the property to the HQS standards, and your observation as to how well or not that individual inspector did their job of following their standards. Does that answer the question?
Well, yeah,
It's a little different than anything we've done in the past.
I understand, and that there's a lot of logic to that. But as far as doing the parallel inspection, I mean, there's 9 software, tablet, computers, data collection, fillable PDFs,
Sure.
so on and so forth. Are we shadowing the inspector? I love that word, shadowing the inspector.
We've used that word before. Yes, we are shadowing, concurrent, whatever you want to use. Now, I'm going to talk in the next slide about specifically the software application, because unlike UPCS, we don't have a protocol hard and fast for the inspection criteria in the case of HQS. There's an awful lot of discretion because remember, it's pass-fail. We don't do level 1, 2, 3. We don't do any other parts. But let me turn to Terry to make sure that I'm talking to the subject matter expert here, because I don't want to misstate anything.
You will be side by side shadowing the contract inspector or the housing authority inspector or employee and conducting a HQS inspection by federal regulation, because what we have found in all the previous inspections that we have done is that the individual housing authorities have adapted or adopted additional codes, local building codes or local housing codes, and their own additional above the federal HQS requirements. And a lot of them are in line with the UPCS, but your goal right now as the QC of the housing authority on the HQS will be the HQS federal regulations, without the local code exceptions or without the housing authority requirements that are over and above that regulation. That's what we're asking you to do.
Okay, so it basically is just a manpower situation. Travel, manpower, you get there, you do it, it's a done deal, you notify the housing authority that you're going to be doing it. So
Right.
There's no call center, no paper, mail, notification, nothing.
Very simple.
Okay.
They're the ones doing all the scheduling. They're the ones who've set it all up. You are shadowing, to use your word, showing up, conducting the inspection using only our standards. And to Terry's point, what we are coming to realize in the ones we've looked at so far is they take the 79 and double it with everything local code, et cetera, et cetera. We're not asking anything about that part of the inspection. We want to see the HQS standards. Are they in fact following those standards to the best judgment of the inspector conducting the inspection, and give us back your results to the standard and their compliance with HQS?
Okay, is that what that 8,000 to 50,000 represents initially?
No,
Or is
that
the whole-
8,000 to 50,000 is what we're envisioning. Remember, I used the word anticipated for the next 5 years per year. The first tranche that we are going to be looking at, to your very good question, is going to be the HQS we're describing now. That's our immediate need, but there are other requirements that are going to be evolving very quickly right behind it.
Well, yeah, and basically that doesn't incorporate any IT
No.
development. I mean, that could actually start tomorrow.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Okay? Good question. That answer that part? Okay. I think we've talked a lot about slide 5. We're doing real well here, I think. So slide 6, and we probably have touched upon some of this already. In one fashion or another, we give you the link to look at it. All of you, I believe, in the room are probably familiar with one fashion 240 protocol. That's what we're asking for UPCS. And this is a good time, and you can see the words here that we have applied. What we're going to be asking for HQS is the 52580 or the 52580-A, real simple. And I'll have Terry explain just a little bit about what that part will look like in terms of the format, and then I'll talk about UPCS-V.
As far as the format, as long as you're using, whether you use it on the laptop or you use the fillable PDF or any means, as long as we get the 52580
form, and we will be requesting the hard copy or a soft copy of the original HQS inspection that was conducted by their inspector, so we can do a side-by-side comparison. The 52580 form itself, the 52580A is a long form, and then you have a short form. One is 8 pages, one is 30. I don't know why they call one short and one long, but they're both very, very long. But either one of those forms is acceptable. Again, it gets into the pass-fail thing, side-by-side inspection. Those provided to us, we will do the quality control, quality assurance reviews prior to payment.
No rank reasonableness, no,
Just the HQS
That's it.
inspection.
Real simple. Okay, great question. So let me talk about UPCS. Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, go ahead to the microphone so the folks can
Because we got to
know our questions, so we can be fair to everybody throughout the great land of America that might be watching this someday. So will you be asking the vendor to do the comparison between the two?
No, sir.
Give
We
you a
will-
report of where is our discrepancies, or you will be doing the,
We will be doing the reviews, the side-by-side comparison of between the original versus the contractor.
We're asking you to, go ahead.
On the initial 8,000, that is the case.
okay. Okay? But it can make sense, since we're gonna be there side by side shadowing, Sure. the vendor can give you that comparison, at least on the first level. And then you can look at that in more depth, if that's something that you'd like to Right. do.
Yeah,
Yeah, and another way of saying is, we're looking for your observations, we'll make the judgments.
yes.
But we are expecting you to have reviewed your own work.
You have to
Yes.
quality.
For completeness, etc.
Yes,
Yes,
yes, you have to
so-
do quality control. One thing I do want to point out and make a point of is the 52580 form must be completed, fully, it must be complete, all Ts crossed, the Is dotted, right? Okay, but,
Yeah, I just want to confirm, so if I hear you correctly, you rather have it as a hard or soft form as opposed to getting data?
well, I think it's going to be much easier for mobility purposes and comparison purposes to soft copies.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, just,
Yeah,
just wanted
soft.
to make sure.
I'm just saying.
So there's no preference for making it data then, okay.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So, UPCSV. The first part speaks for itself. V is voucher, no surprise. What we are looking at, and we've already built a prototype in-house, but down the road, and I can't tell you this is in the end of 14, early 15, but not that far away, knowing all the limitations of HQS that I think many of us are very familiar with, 79 pass-fails gives it is problematic in terms of what we see for results, particularly in what we've looked at so far in our own results. We are looking and envisioning taking that component of the UPCS, taking the unit and only the unit, and that would be the core of what we would inspect, to the same standards as what we do right now in UPCS. There would be a couple additional or a few additional items that would be going into it. One of the things that, remember, is quite different in the world of vouchers, because it's 100%, is that every discrepancy has to be addressed within 30 days. So the discrepancies take on a different import. The scoring is not quite the driver that it is in the sampling methodology that we do in UPCS. The scoring is relevant, particularly for us from a quality assurance perspective, from a trending perspective, but it's the observation of discrepancies per unit and the correction of those within a specified time period that still drives the process. But we wanted to get it to be something, as I said earlier, UPCS is the standard. This is a derivative of UPCS that speaks to a much smaller universe of the unit itself. For those that are or are not familiar, I could have 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units in a 100-unit building that happen to be voucher units. That's all I'm really concerned about from the time I go through that doorway, is that particular unit and its contents. There are a couple areas we're looking at to make sure we get those important things, egress, fire issues, things of that nature, or perhaps common entrance, which we're looking at, but the majority of it is focused on the unit and its condition to the standards we know as UPCS. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that, but for clarity, in this initial aspect, and we've had some great questions on it, it's HQS as we know it today, and someday soon, it will evolve to UPCSV, and you will all be given the opportunity to train, understand, see the software, the standards, et cetera, to go with that. Any questions on UPCSV and what it might look like? Okay, let's go to the next slide, which is slide 7. Oh, I'm on 7, okay. Somebody help me. The photo part we kind of touched upon. We don't currently use it in 4.0. What we're looking at, and you can see the words will require photos at a minimum at level 3 defects. That's what we want to kind of hear your dialogue on. What we're envisioning now for this HQS inspection is doing this at some point in time. We did it with our first inspections we did. It wasn't particularly difficult, technology being what it is nowadays. We would like to hear from your perspective how difficult it might be to take the HQS as you know it to the form that Terry described and add photos to that, particularly since we want to stay soft. Any thoughts, comments on being able or the capacity? We know in industry right now that's done in many places. It's not anything that's beyond anybody's particular challenge. So any comments, thoughts about requiring that in the beginning for the reason that we're saying? And it's very simple. And I'll explain just a little bit so you can kind of understand the background. We are appropriated about $20 billion a year for the voucher program by the Congress on an annual basis. It is the responsibility of HUD to ensure that we're meeting the standard of decent, safe, and sanitary. To those residents, it is very important that that standard be met. To those property owners, it's very important that that standard be met. There are issues over the judgment calls involved in the current pass-fail. We strengthen the hand of all associated with this by virtue of the photos. That's the logic that I'm expressing. What I'm interested in hearing, too hard, we can do this, we should consider this capability because we know we want to be able, we've already done it, we want to be able to look at that as being one of the things that we would include right off in the get-go for the reasons I think all of you understand. Yes, sir.
Well, I think that's it's an excellent idea. I know in our experience in providing inspection software, that has been something that, well, there's a lot of ambiguity, obviously. There's a lot of training that goes into these types of things. You get individuals out there, and to be able to allow the ease of auditability, to be able to come in and rapidly determine, yeah, this is what it is. You can spend a whole lot of time writing that up, putting that into a notes section, or you can take that picture, cut down on the time it takes you to be at the facility, and instantly, most people are able to see, yeah, this meets the letter of the law or it doesn't. Photos are something that is, in terms of cutting down on the time it takes per unit to do things, in terms of accuracy, quality, it's just something that I think is going to be the expectation rather than an enhancement down the road for anyone doing any type of inspection.
Good point, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
No, statement, or just a follow-up on yours. Most successful HQS inspection programs around the country already do this. Primarily, the outsourced ones, primarily for justification of no entries, no shows, you got to take a picture of the car next door and so on and so forth, because there's revenue involved. And I think the biggest problem would be when it applies to numbers of level 3s and that type thing, is capacity in the mobility equipment now. So, you know.
You mean bandwidth when you say
yeah,
capacity,
it basically means we're talking Windows-based as opposed to iPad, and I don't want to throw any names around, but
Okay.
yeah, we see, I mean, because we've been through this, through the decades here with the tablets and the mobility aspect of it, and whether you've got to launch all this stuff to the cloud or you can keep it inside, and what you want for resolution, especially if there's a liability scenario. So those things have to be worked out. And so we're talking cost.
Okay.
But-
So am I hearing a doable? Yeah. Good.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. The picture is already being done. I wanted to point out that voice is another thing that you might want to consider, adding a message, because sometimes pictures are not able to take a good picture depending on the discrepancy. So a voice message can be also useful to clarify the discrepancy.
Okay, good points, thank you.
Yes.
You want to add? Yeah, I was going to say, I'm just turning to Patrick.
Yes. When we're talking about the QC of the inspections, the photos will allow somebody else within your organization to confirm that it does meet what the inspector said at the time, so it'll allow that opportunity. So when it comes back to us for our review, there should be much less discrepancies. So if, I think the one they've been telling me is about painting of a sprinkler heads where it's, it's painted on the side or it's painted over the head. I mean, I think somebody's been talking to me about that. So that sort of gives you a way for your company to be able to review the results of your inspector before you send it to us, so that we get a good quality product and you deliver us a good quality product.
Thank you. Terry, anything to add?
Yes. By taking a photo, you're basically putting quality assurance with each inspector. Every time they make a recording in the inspection, now they have to not only prove it, or it has to be in line with the deficiency that's noted. Now they're proving that it's in line. So it's a self-quality assurance tool built in.
Thank you. Two good points. Okay, in the interest of moving along, let's go to slide 8. Well, let me stop. Any questions on photos? Any more dialogue? Okay, thank you. Training. We are taking a much different approach for those that have been engaged and been our business partners for some long time period than what we currently do. And I'm going to walk you through that right now. In the reverse auction, we retain the entire responsibility for the qualifications of the inspector, the training and certification of the inspector, and we look at this at the inspector level as to whether he or she is doing the job correctly. What I'm going to describe to you now as I go through this is a much different approach, and I think all of you will probably have some ideas or thoughts on it. Please share if you care to, but as we go through it, I think you'll understand the process we're looking at it and the ramifications might be as compared to our current business model. So the qualifications and the training of the inspector is going to be the responsibility of the contractor. We are not going to tell you that the person has to be this, and this. We're going to give you a minimum in terms of number of inspections and a basic qualification, but it's going to be your call as to the people you employ. You're going to provide the classroom training for the physical inspections for UPCS, HQS, and any other software or changes such as UPSV or anything we pick up under the White House initiative, and you're going to be the one who's going to provide that training. It will not be HUD. You're going to give us, we're asking, I should say, I don't want to sound quite so declarative here, we're going to ask you to give us a weekly report as we see your inspectors, et cetera, primarily to look at your capacity and your ability to get the job done. So we want to have a clear understanding of where you are in your ability to work and do the things that we're asking of you as we do that. I'm going to continue, and I'll take the questions at the end of training, so let's go to slide 9 to continue the dialogue. We're going to provide to you a Train the Trainer class, specifically on UPCS, that we will do within 90 days of the date of the award. If you already have people working for you that are already certified under our current protocol, then they're ready to go. So we're going to have you have the ability no later than 90 days. We're looking at your capabilities. We certainly are looking to do that earlier based upon your requirements. You will have that core training provided to your trainer or your master trainer, however you want to label it. And then from that point, that person with that qualification is going to be the one that does your training, or persons, plural. We're going to allow you to use our tools, go into our learning management system, to start doing the phase 1 training, which is how many hours, Terry?
It's approximately 1 week of online training prior to attending the classroom training.
That will weed out the weak-hearted as they start going through doing this and seeing what we are expecting. But I think in seriousness, it gives a good idea for people, particularly your new entries, a very good way to get a baseline so that that'll be much more productive training as we go through that. You know what I'm going to do at this point? I'm going to turn over to the experts. So if you cover the rest of this, Terry.
Okay, what we envision is we provide you access to the LMS system or ever who you deem qualified to attend the training. And for the UPCS training, they would access our program, they would access the training team and get their ID numbers, and they would go online and do their training, whether it be, it's a self-paced program. And so if they can do it in 3 days is great, but if not, 5 days. Once they complete that, then the onus would fall back on you to provide the classroom training. And then once they complete the classroom training, there will be a criteria that you will set and give and provide to us as to what deems them qualified to conduct the UPCS inspection on their own, which currently we call that phase 2. And we conduct that side by side with a QA inspector. Again, that process will go away and it will all fall back in your hands. The whole training process, with the exception of the LMS system, will be in your control. And we will just maintain a presence at your training sites or during your training to ensure that you are teaching to a certain standard and the information provided is relevant. That's basically it.
So the certification is your responsibility. At the end of the day, we're giving all the tools to you. We still have the regulatory oversight requirements of being able to look at your program from a quality control perspective, but we're telling you, we don't want to tie your hands, but we're holding you responsible and accountable for the outcome, i.e. you pick the inspector, you make sure that individuals got the necessary qualifications. And I should note, from a logistic perspective, the reason that we're doing this component that we spoke of, which is the phase 1 with the online, that's to give the person the number so that we can then track from then on who that person is for inspection purposes, et cetera, because that's how we follow the inspector qualities, or the individual has then got that number, and that number is going to be then the label of who did that inspection all time following that they're doing this kind of inspections. But after that point, you own the process. We'll be quality assuring. We'll be coming to your training classes unannounced, et cetera, to ensure that we're comfortable with your due diligence, but you own the process. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I thought I was going to have a second longer to think about this. Is the actual training and completing inspections, that's all going to be under the same IDQ, or is it possible that someone could set up to just do certification training as a separate thing? Maybe you can address that, maybe?
Now, if I understand your question, would there be a separate action where we would provide this? Is that what you're asking?
Or a separate contractor, you're saying, possibly doing the training. We had anticipated, in the way that we were looking at it now, as it being a part of the IDIQs, the contractors that are doing the inspections, handling the training portion, us providing the online capabilities, but the other aspects of the training that HUD has handled internally and given out in the past would be in control of the contractors that are doing the inspections, and we would take on more of a quality control role in which we would just verify that whatever you put in as the way that you're going to do the training, that's really the way that you're doing it, or that you're delivering the training in the manner that you said that you were, and then you're maintaining the process of the training and keeping people qualified in that.
Did I answer your question? Or do we thoroughly confuse you?
Halfway through the question, I almost wanted to say, never mind.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Just an observation on that same point. I think it may be efficient to have one third party perform the training to assure consistency in training, as opposed to 7 contractors that introduces an element of inconsistency, perhaps. So just some.
Good point, and we'll take a board. Yeah, and before we take the question, here's what we're trying to do. We want you to understand that you are responsible for the quality of the inspection. If I take over the responsibility for certification and training and all the other components, I can't really hold you responsible for the outcome. So I'm telling you, you are responsible for the outcome, and therefore I will give you the tools to be able to do that what we expect, but you must be the one that own the process to get to the desired outcome, which is a good inspection reflecting the condition of that property. It's just that simple. Yes, sir.
I'd like to discuss a kind of vague timing here. There's a number of certified REAC inspectors out there. Okay. When
Reverse
is
auction, you mean contractors?
Yeah. When will the reverse auction end? In light timing wise after your HQS startup, and so there's nothing to stop me from recruiting certified REAC inspectors that have done an inspection within, 180 days. They stay certified and not have any training. Is that a possible timing element?
It's a great question. We are not going to stop the reverse auction process. The marketplace is the marketplace. The people that end up doing A versus B is going to be your call as to what those people are.
Or both.
Sure, because that entity, for those that may or may not be familiar with the reverse auction, we come out every month or so, basically give a list of properties. They're inspected, individuals and or companies compete for that work, and then conduct those inspections. We totally understand and appreciate that you might make a more interesting offer to a current person doing reverse auction, and they may come to your domain. That's what the market does. We have to manage through that. I totally understand that risk from a government perspective, but in the current reverse auction mode, I do not have the resources to be able to do all of the inspections we're being required to do, and hence we're having this conversation.
Okay, so when you talk about REAC certification to do future UPCS or UPCSV or whatever, as far as compliance goes, now what about HQS? I mean, there really is no, quote, certification.
Good question. Yep. Terry.
Exactly the point. Again, it will fall back on you as the contractor to gather the qualified people or identify the qualified people and bring them into training and provide the HQS training that will get them out the door and provide us with a good, valid HQS inspection on the federal requirements. That's the onus, again, falls back on you.
So we're going to be doing training for, let's say I recruit the REAC certified inspectors to say, hey, learn the HQS. It's not going to last, but take the class, hopefully. And you're going to go out and do QC inspections and report. And that's, I presume, why you still need the housing authority's inspector's inspection, and then the QC, contracted by HUD, inspection, and you're going to manually compare them, as opposed to a qualified QC say, hey, here's the problems. Mm-hmm. And, I know, through REAC and everything, you can decertify people on the spot and so on and so forth for fouling up. But how do we manage that? And is that going to require more HQS, QC, HUD guys to follow the QC contractor guys? And that's going to be worked out. You trust.
That's going to, yes.
You're going to trust everybody. Okay, good.
Well, let's continue the dialogue a little bit, because it's a very relevant and important point to what we're trying to accomplish. All of us in this room understand that HQS has nowhere near the structure or the certification requirements, by the nature of the beast, that exist in UPCS. However, when we do these HQS inspections, we must follow the regulations that apply. So when you are conducting them, should you be the party that's going to be doing that, you're shadowing, great word, we use it ourselves, that individual recording two things: those observations your inspector sees, and looking to see if in fact that inspector followed their own protocol. The comparison is you take a copy of their inspection plus the one you did and you give it to us. We will make the judgment as to whether it followed within those standards. We're asking you to make sure you complete the entire inspection form. That is your requirement, to make sure you do that. Is this the best of both worlds? No, it is not. But within the rules that we are operating, that's all we can do. HQS is very soft. We know that. Like I said, we were quite surprised, I was surprised, a lot of you probably not, that there was in some cities 39, 40, 50 items added on to HQS looking at local code, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We are not asking you to look at anything except for the federal standard of HQS. This is a relative, into the scope of 5 years, what I'm describing is a relatively short endeavor within the 5 years. We're only going to get this done to get this part. At the same time, we know we're going to be asking you to also, in a different task order, to be doing UPCS with people that you have certified, or if they already have been certified by us, to be doing UPCS inspections. And we provide the software for UPCS-V. We'll go through the training exercise as we're describing. Your persons, because remember, it's no different than a derivative of UPCS. We're just looking at the unit. You would have the same material of train the trainer. We'll get you started with all the material, and then you'd be the one who'd be certifying the capabilities and qualifications of your people and conducting those inspections. I mean, I'm trying to simplify it here, but HQS, we have to live within the current rules. The rules give us not a lot of discretion in terms of being able to tighten anything. It is what it is. Yes, sir.
On the HQS side, if the PHA inspection passes, but our inspection fails, what happens to the enforcement side? Does it pass back to the PHA?
We've seen some of those, and that's one of the things that we have to observe. Sometimes they pass, and what would that tell me? That would tell me for everybody, so if I got it right, the PHA person passed.
Correct.
But the contract person or our person, speaking to the past, failed it.
Correct.
That would tell me they were not following the standards. That would be my determination.
But what would happen with a 24-hour, something has to be completed in 24 hours or 30 days?
Good question.
What's gonna happen to the
The
enforcement
only, great question. The only observable discrepancies that count are that of the PHAs. They are the ones, ours is not going to be inserted, oh, by the way, you need to fix these too. Ours is strictly for a quality control check to make sure we're doing what we're doing. PHA still is totally responsible for what they observe. Okay? Yes, sir.
I just wanted to add something on that because of when you do quality control inspections, they always supersede the regular inspections. So if you find more discrepancies as a QC, you have to notify the PHA and the owner and the tenant for their safety. They have to address those deficiencies. If we find additional issues, somehow it should be communicated to the PHA so they can address them.
Are you talking primarily exigent health and safety type things?
In any kind of deficiency.
Yeah.
Because you might have that risk that you knew of an issue and you did not act upon.
Right.
And that can be another.
It's a good question, and I'd answer it, what the purpose of what we're doing in this round that I'm describing is more to a survey than a quality control component. We need to have a better understanding of the dimension of the problem. So we've looked at 1,200, but remember there are 2.3 million units that are vouchered. So there's a whole lot more out there than what we've seen in our first look. That means that we want to have a better understanding from a survey. So I don't envision us taking the federal and saying, here, you must correct these, you being the federal because you represent us, versus the PHA and saying, well, you're wrong and we're right. We're not going to get into that kind of a conversation. All we're going to do is take the results and go forward. Now, we could find, and we'll have to talk about this internal to us, if there's some obvious safety hazard and the person doesn't say anything, we will probably think about how we would address that to make sure that we don't, as you represent the government, don't do anything about it when we know, in fact, there's a danger. That's going to be probably caveated as one of your things you have to be aware of. But beyond that, our list will not be the operative list for discrepancies.
Yeah,
Your list, I should say.
I had a different question on the assignments. Would you consider assigning units by the inspection type, or it would be a combination? Are you going to be putting up for bid HQS inspections separately than UPCS or UPCS-V, or just a combination of all the different types?
The task orders, the individual task orders.
Yeah, individual task orders.
So, and on the task orders, you were saying earlier that you don't anticipate lumping HQS with UPCS, and we would, in all likelihood, put them out as separate competitive actions for task orders, and then that way, nothing would get all muddled and protocols don't get all crazy. And now, there could be several task orders running at the same time because of the way that they would be broken up, and one company may have more than one task order operating, but we don't, at this point, anticipate putting out a task order that would just be, well, we just got 5,000 and they're a mixture of all these different kinds, that they would in all likelihood be split up to, just for ease of, for us and for you to be able to keep everything straight as to what the protocols offer each one.
Good questions, thank you. On this topic, any more questions on training? And all the things associated therewith. Okay, we're making progress. Let's go to QC requirements. I'm getting all kinds of help, I love it. This is, excuse me if I make a mistake here, Joel, this is boilerplate, is that a good word? In that, and what I mean by that is that the language a lot of you will recognize here are the things that we, the government, expect you, the contractors, to do for us in terms of quality control. So you can certainly read it. I'm not going to go through all the items on here, but once again, it emphasizes with specificity, we are holding you responsible for the quality of the product, the inspection, and we will conduct appropriate quality control to ensure that we're getting what the taxpayers expect, which is a good inspection for the best price we can get. That's what we're looking for. So this kind of lays out all the components of the plan that you would have to see and you would see in the particular action we're asking for. You want to add anything to that?
And the real specifics of how we would do quality control measures and things like that would be laid out in a quality assurance surveillance plan and a QC plan and stuff like that. So that you'll get more information on that as we kind of iron out the details when we put out the solicitation. But this is just kind of broad stroke of the types of things that we do as far as quality control and things like that.
Any questions on this particular aspect? Okay. This is written to make sure everybody understands that we're really emphasizing a different model, which is you're accountable for the product. Not that you have not been in the past, but we didn't facilitate or enable you to do that. When we were the ones that were doing most of the front end and the back end, all we could really look at is the work of an individual inspector. That is not what we're going to be looking at anymore. Obviously, individual inspectors and their actions are important, but the party that is responsible to make sure we get the right outcome is the contractor for whom that individual works. And that's the level that we're going to be focusing at for any actions that we might take if we are not seeing those standards being met. So yes, we'll look at individual inspectors, but it's going to be the company, the contractor, that's where we're going to be coming back to make sure that we're getting the right standards. Anything you want to add to that, Joel?
Well, and just what I want to say is that what we're trying to do is move away from these service contracts that we set up that become more and more like personal service contracts. We want to give you the ability to control the way that things are done. We just want to control what we get as a result. We want you to be held accountable for the things that you do, and we want to stop telling you how to do things so that way you can do things the best way you know how, and we can hold you to the standards that we're setting and not tell you how the process needs to work.
Questions, good, okay.
I realize that this is not a request, we're not at the stage where this is a request for proposals, but the thing that kind of concerns me in all this, I'm trying to still get my head around, are we eventually going to be asked to bottom line bid, okay, it's $500 per inspection, not knowing if it's an HQS, a PCSV, a complete REAC?
You will know exactly.
We're going to have a whole menu of things that we're bidding on? I'll let you take it.
If I understand your question, envision we ask you to do 1,000 HQS inspections. These are the cities that we expect you to do them in, and this is the time period that we expect to have them completed. Next scope of work. These are the 300 UPS inspections we expect you to do. These are the locations we anticipate and any other relevant information you would need to know. That's how it's going to be organized. So we're going to do everything possible that there is no confusion or misunderstanding as to what we want done, by when, at what place.
So bidding on complete task order.
So,
Correct.
well, in the proposal for the IDIQs will be broken down. It won't be just, this is the blanket inspection. All the requirements for each type of inspection, how they'll be done and everything will be laid out in the performance work statement for the IDIQ. So we will be looking at and evaluating price-wise when establishing the IDIQ, the cost of each different type of inspection, not just a blanket term of inspection wouldn't cover everything, because there's different aspects and requirements for each one. So when we're doing that, it would be setting up for each different type of inspection, not just a blanket inspections, hey, this is what you said an inspection is, you can't change what you're saying type of thing.
That answer your
And then,
question?
and the task orders will be competitive and things like that, and I've created more questions.
You know, you might
now.
want to explain IDIQ and task orders. I
Yeah,
think there's a little bit
I'm
of
sorry, I'll
confusion.
step back up here so I can
Okay.
complete that.
Yeah,
The thing I'm trying to avoid in my mind is having committed to doing a certain type of work at a certain price and then be handed a second task order where I'm obligated to come in and do them for the same price under conditions that don't seem different to you, but seem really different to us in terms of where we've got feet on the ground, that sort of thing.
right, so, and so, because we're gonna be competing the task orders, that's kind of why we wanna do it in that aspect. We don't wanna set something up where we're saying, hey, this is bottom line, nothing changes, we're just gonna tell you, go do these inspections, we've chosen you. We're gonna be going out and requesting proposals for task orders against all the people, whoa, almost knocked that over, haha. Against all the people that are established in the IDIQs, right? And then from that, we'll be evaluating them. So if things change a little bit, or if there's something that's specific that's different for the location or the type of inspection, we can take those things into account rather than setting something up where we're just ordering without saying anything. That's why we want to have that competitive process, because we don't want you to be stuck in a situation either where we want to have a beneficial relationship for us where we're getting what we need, but where you're getting what you need to be able to make profit and do all the things that you do.
Each task order could very well have a completely different price. It all depends what we're asking, the scope, the location, et cetera, et cetera. Each one is competed. That's, I think, the
Yeah,
part
and
that-
that's the big thing.
yeah.
I actually have a follow-up, and then I have a comment, a follow-up question to that.
Okay.
So I envision, I assume that you're gonna make the task orders, fixed-price task orders. And on the, if in fact it is gonna be a fixed-price task order, are you gonna do it on a unit level or an inspection level? And if you do that, are you gonna consider geography? So like, you might lump two housing authorities together in an inspection plan, I don't know, in Michigan. And one in Detroit might be a different price than one in Flint. So how are you gonna deal with that in terms of a fixed price strategy?
It's a great question. And remember, we are trying to be as reasonable and understanding the market as you are. We would want to organize the task orders in a way that made perfect sense, understanding where you sit. You would not see a New York City with a San Diego. You wouldn't see a Detroit with a St. Louis. I mean, you would see this in a geographical bound that makes perfect sense, particularly for HQS. The thing that's much different for the large housing authorities, for example, when I was in Miami, we had 16,000 vouchers. In Detroit, there's 8,000. So these bigger cities are where the majority of them are. We could be looking at this, and we haven't made this final determination. It could be down to a specific city in terms of the task order. It's got to be something that makes sense because they're all quite different.
Well, and just as a sort of my comment that I came up to here about was that a lot of us, let's say you award 7 contractors, a lot of us will probably be using the same inspectors. There will be some overlap in terms of using inspectors. One, I think in terms of the training perspective, and this isn't a question, just comments on the RFP.
Sure.
One, in terms of the training inspectors, you know, holding different standards and holding different trainings across 7 entities may be an issue. And then the second thing is just keeping in mind that when you're issuing the task orders, that if there's 7 different people that can be using some of the same inspectors, that geographic considerations be taken into consideration.
Sure.
That's all.
No, it's a good point, and remember, one of the issues we have now is that we are contract inspector certified and certified contract inspector limited. So in the current model, we cannot get all the work we have done. Therefore, what this is about is growing that population of entities and inspectors that would be doing this work. So we understand there's an immediate threshold of people that now are certified, and we're saying as we progress into this new model, we envision, in partnership, but envision growing a larger universe of people who are interested in doing this. There is an awful lot of inspectors out there in the country. I mean, FEMA's got a ton of folks. There's a lot of inspectors in the country. We think the marketplace will drive what we think will come about. You want to add something to that, Joel?
Well, kind of, I just want to talk a little bit too about establishing the IDIQ. So when we establish an IDIQ, we have to evaluate pricing. So we will have to look at a way and come up with a way where it's not necessarily we have to come up with a list for every city that would say a inspection in Detroit costs this much and an inspection here costs that much. So it's still something that we're working through before we put out the solicitation, because we're required by the federal acquisition regulations to look at the price. So it's something that we have to think through more on our side that makes sense, so that we can make it to where we don't put you in a situation where it's really costing you more to do an inspection than it is that you're getting paid for it. But so it's something that I have to work through with me and other people that I'm working with to kind of think through it so that it works for both. And so that may be something too that if we go out for more information on another IFI, that we might spitball an idea and ask for feedback on that too.
Good point, thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay. Regarding the schedule and timelines, do you have a set schedule from the time that the properties are issued to the contractor to the time that he completes the work?
Our current practice, go ahead.
The current performance period, I believe, is 90 days from the award of the REAC contract. That, I guess, varies depending on if you file for an extension, but the typical is a 90-day.
To get the inspection
And
completed
I'm not
and
sure
have
about
reports.
this particular one because it's going to vary, again, by contract or by task order.
Yeah, so if I
don't know
understand your
specific.
question from, say, the new model, and we're not gonna tell you it's 90, it's some of the part we're gonna be looking at, but the current is 90. So in the current model, when you compete in the reverse auction and you are awarded, then you have to finish it in 90 days. Using that as a benchmark, we can go up, we can go down. Remember, HQS is much different than what we do for UPCS because we don't have to do notifications and a lot of other things involved. We might make it a shorter window, to be determined. But there will be a specified time from the time we give you all of the information and you've won that task award that we expect to have a finished product.
Okay. Second question, regarding the report that I have on my system, am I required to have some sort of retention or archiving of the data for you for a certain period of time? And what would that timeline be?
That's actually a very good question. It's something I think we're going to have to think about, because we are going to need to pull that information. Once we've pulled it, we may basically say, we need to keep it for 30 days or on our side, and then, you can delete it or so on. But something that I think, yes, we will have to consider.
Okay.
That's a
It's
good
something to
question.
think about. When we did the healthy homes, we were still getting requests for reports probably 5 years after the contract was done.
Yeah, no, we envision pulling a complete copy of your information.
I would envision it being a relatively short time period.
Yeah.
We're not gonna ask you to have a data warehouse to keep this forever and ever. It'd be something we'd take responsibility for, shortly after we took it. Good question. Okay. Favorite subject of everybody at the end of the day, payment. We all have bills to pay. We all have people to keep employed. As you can see, it speaks to itself. we are looking, unlike those that might be familiar with reverse auction, it's a debit card and you're paid upon completion. This is a much different model. We would see, based upon the task order, the invoice, it would come, we honor the Prompt Payment Act, and we'd want to pay as soon as possible. So let's say we had 500 out there, and we said 90 days, and they were all done by the 80th day, whatever, and it also happened to be the end of the month. Then whatever billing cycle we set up, we would pull them, we make sure they're all happy with the results, you submit your invoice, and we would pay. Anything you want to add to that, Joel?
So basically, the way that it would work would be more of when you've been awarded a task order, you've completed it, we've accepted it. Within whatever we've accepted within a monthly time frame, you would be able to submit so the 1st of January, you would be able to submit whatever we accepted through December. That type of frameworks. Rather than as soon as you complete it, we pay for it. It would be we've accepted it and did whatever comparison or whatever process we lay out for the acceptance. Then once we've accepted it, then you would be able to invoice the next month for whatever. So if you had an ongoing task order that's 90 days of 2,000 inspections and you did 1,000 in the first 2 months and they've been accepted by us, then theoretically you would be able to invoice for the ones that have been completed and accepted the previous month. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay.
You're talking net 30 days.
Right.
Right. Cash flow, very important. We understand that. That's why we want to pay on a monthly basis. Yes, sir.
So question about payment. It sounds by the discussion that the item being paid for is a complete inspection.
Correct.
So in the solicitation that I'm envisioning, you've got computer, storage, network, training, a lot of other services that one might invoice for, unless the expectation is that each vendor rolls all of that up and comes up with a composite price that bakes all that in to a completed inspection. Is there any consideration for payment of other services that are clearly required on the contract?
Right, so that's something we still have to kind of talk through on our side too, but we would have to do something for at least the component of computer storage and things like that, at least in the front end of how it's going to be set up, or depending on the feedback that we get between us talking and from you in the industry. But I don't know. I think kind of the way that we've been thinking about training, that we're just providing it so that you can keep people trained and determine that they can work on the contract and complete the inspections and stuff. Not that we would be paying monthly for you to keep training people, that it would be you maintaining the training in order to be able to have individuals and that's why we want to take that aspect of us giving you the training and saying, this is the way that it's going to be trained. We give you access to the training so that you can give the training to whoever you need to go out and to complete the inspections. And then it becomes more of an incentive so that you have people that are trained in order to go out and do the inspections, and not you getting paid to train people to be able to do inspections. Does that make sense, kind of? Or?
Well, certainly, yep, and I understand that point of view. I guess from the corporate side,
Right, yeah.
while we're training those people, somebody's internally paying those trainers.
Right.
And that time needs to be accounted for just in a basic corporate government accounting fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm getting at is you would naturally roll that back up into
Into your overhead.
yeah, I
and
guess
things like
is
that,
what you're
right.
saying.
Right.
And again, so back to my question, at the moment, it sounds like the unit of payment on an invoice is an inspection.
Correct.
And I would just suggest that you might give some thought to other items to be paid for. And then I would also say, regarding the IDIQ and the competition and the pricing, it also might be interesting to consider CLINs, line items, that account for services at a level of granularity that would allow you to run a fairly efficient competition. And by that I mean maybe labor hours, maybe there's data charges and other price components. Just a suggestion.
Okay.
No, those are good points, and we realize that the marketplace per task order will determine. Obviously, you have overhead, obviously cash is king, we understand that, but that's why the individual task orders will delineate. But we do have to go back and look at that front end piece.
And if I might, while I'm standing here, the other thing that didn't seem resolved in my mind back to the data IT format question. If you've got, let's just pick 5 IDIQ holders, just to pick a number, and each of them is storing their inspections in whatever format apparently they want. And then you've got 5 different potential formats that you need to collect and pull data from and then make sense of and analyze. It seems to me if you take a look at, just pick the IRS as an example, and you've got Intuit and all the other companies that build tax, TurboTax, and so on. What the IRS does is puts out a standard and says, I don't care what it looks like on the user end, but this is the format you need to submit to me. I would make that recommendation as well. That way, we don't have to go figure that out. You say, this is the format, and you let the programmers on the vendor side figure out what it needs to look like, so that when you get it, you don't get 7 different types of formats that you have to sort out. Just a suggestion.
Yes, sorry, if I didn't make that clear, no. We would provide the information to you about each type of inspection, whether it be a HQS or a UPCS, because each type of inspection would have slightly different information, but we would provide it to all 7 vendors in an identical way. There would not be 7 different. And when we receive the information, it would be in an identical way from all 7 vendors. We are not planning on having 7 different formats. It would be one format for a UPCS inspection. It would be one format for a HQS inspection. It would be one format regardless of the vendor.
So, excuse me, so you would define the IT format?
Yes, and that's why I was talking about using some of the industry standard formats, using SOA architecture to exchange information, and using the interchange of MISMO or NEAMS or so on would be defining the exact format that the data will be transferred in. Yes.
And we would
Thank
spell
you.
that out very clearly,
Yes.
just for the reasons you say.
Great, perfect,
Correct.
thanks.
And I think what we were trying to say before is that we don't want to dictate how you're digitally storing stuff to allow us to access it, whatever means that you're using as a place of storage where we can pull it and retrieve it from. We just want to be able to pull the data that we need as it's required by us.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Just going back to the unit pricing issue, one thing that I envision being a problem is because of economies of scale, one time, as soon as a contractor wins a large scope of inspections, it almost automatically makes the second set of inspections cheaper for them for the exact reason he was saying, is that if those training costs and IT costs are built into the inspection level, the more you get, the cheaper it's going to be. So I see that as a problem.
Excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, I just see that as a problem in terms of an IQC with 7 contractors. Like, it's almost like if somebody's getting 1,000 inspections and then somebody else is getting 5,000 inspections, the person who got 1,000 inspections or no inspections is automatically going to have a more expensive price and be sort of bid out of the future task orders. It's just an observation.
No, it's an excellent point, and we have to keep that in mind to make sure that we're fair throughout the process. We want all the people that are on the IDQ to be successful. Nobody wins if we start having people that are failing. So we want to make sure that we do this in a way that keeps everybody viable throughout the entire life of the contract. Any other questions, comments? I have one. While you're standing up, let me read this that came to us, and I just would answer it for all of you. And the question is, as HUD/PHAs are finally tuned to the possible presence and mitigation of radon, asbestos, lead-based paint, and mold in housing stock, would the scope of expected capabilities of companies incorporate detection and/or lab testing as separate task orders for the contract? And the answer is no. We are doing UPCS, and we are doing HQS, and eventually UPCSV. So it's a great question, and definitely an immediate need for all the people who are affected by it, but that's not in our protocol, and it will stay the same. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry if this has been answered before, but is there an anticipated contract value for these RDIQs?
That's still kind of up in the air of the way that we're doing that. That will, all the requirements as per the FAR and stuff like that will come out as we get to that stage of it. But right now we're really just going off what we think on the inspection level would be at this point. So that, and it may not get any more detailed than that when the solicitation comes out. So you may have to derive from however many inspections we're saying max and min about what the value would be.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Two points. Obviously, I'm getting this warm feeling that there's more and more contract, trust, patriotism regarding outside contractors. We're all trying to do the same thing. But I wanted to address one thing about conflicts of interest. Since more is relied for the complete task on the contractor here, and I'm sure it has to do with budgetary considerations and everything else that's going on, and the consolidation of especially the inspections. To start off, as we are our corporate, on the corporate side, basically there's a big investment to be able to cover all the tasks. I'm saying, no, the HQS, you could start tomorrow. But everything else, as this development goes on, to be able to have those expenses up front, this is a 12-month deal coming out of the gate, correct?
Correct.
And then potential add-ons.
A year after for a total of 5.
I mean, I can foresee the numbers going in my head. I'm thinking more of it should be a 3-year startup and 2 additional years. I mean, based on contracts, you know, we've been 1 year. And then your startup thing, you're probably 90 days before revenue starts coming in.
So let me ask you, if just ballparking off, wild guess off your head, what would you think, since we're doing a IDIQ process, right? We would have to have a guaranteed minimum for each awardee. What would you think would be a reasonable, I mean, I'm not saying that we could do it or whatever, because we have kind of a number that we've discussed, but I'd like to hear your feedback.
Well, I mean, here it is. You basically have a UPCSV that, you know, we've been dealing with this organization for a number of years, and if they say 1 year, it's 36 months and stuff like that, there are things to be done. There's a lot of things to be done. If basically this was HQS QC, you know, phase 1, you know, 1 year, whatever, that's easy. But when you start talking about all the other, especially we're involved with the demonstration with a tax credit and everything. And I know, you know, I'm in 3 states that are on the alignment. And it's becoming a task, especially on the independent side for the contractor. When REAC comes in and steps in and pulls an inspection out of a schedule, it becomes nonprofit. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff in the timing. Of course, we're not at a point to say, yes, 90 days, we're going to roll out this, we're going to do UPCS and within 12 months. But just, it's very difficult cost-wise to start up.
Right.
You know, some of us are you know, we've been doing it for a long time and it wouldn't be, but just to be able to say, is this going to be broken down and awarded on HUD regions? See, that makes you think a whole lot differently, especially for the questions asked about logistics, you know, and what's your scope of service?
And
you know, that type of thing?
Well, and part of our issue now is we know what we currently have. We can kind of anticipate the volume of inspections that we have, but we don't know
geographically?
Not really.
Oh.
We don't know how they're going to come down, correct? So
right.
that's part of our issue and part of the reason that we want to put out an IDIQ type
right.
format. So I mean, again, back to my question, what, just spitballing, ballpark, whatever, would you think
Well,
would
you know,
be
if you're looking at
reasonable-
phase 1, I don't think there is hardly any startup cost except manpower.
Right.
Virtually. I mean, you're talking about a 52.580. It's been around for, what, 30-something years? Right? You got the 20-page, which tells you everything you need to do on the left-hand side. But, you know, as far as the fillable form and whatever, I mean, that's a pretty easy comparison.
Right.
Because technically, especially the larger troubled housing authorities that have bad CMAP type thing, you could walk in and do that fairly quick, you know, as stage 1, and roll with that and then find out. But there's going to be a training. There's going to definitely be a training edge. And you know, on the HQS side, since it's not all the phase 1, phase 2, and all that, it's pretty easy, especially if they come from another inspection program. But when you start, there's a lot of question marks regarding, especially when we get into the tax credit thing and going down the road, there's going to be ongoing development on the corporate side, the contractor side. There's not a one fix for everything.
Right.
Coming out of the gate.
Nice.
So, I suggest 3 years and 2 optional years.
So the problem is
because of the
it's
initial
way
investment.
that the money is what dictates the way that we can establish contracts. So the way that
How about
the money,
tax credits?
Well, the way that the money comes in and the way that it's earmarked and the way that it's the color of the money, as you say, it dictates the way that we can do contracting. So in general, it's difficult for us to do like a 3-year base period and stuff like that. And I don't know that that's going to be a possibility. And that's why we're working under the assumption that it's going to have to be a base period of 12 months plus 4 12-month options.
I mean, it's difficult for, I know, many companies here to say, whoa, you know, to gear up to be able to provide all those services. And a lot of them are question marks.
Right.
But if you said HQS, QC, that's easy for most of us.
Right, so what we have right now, the initial inspections that we have to do are what format, DJ? They're the
HQS.
HQS, right? So those are the ones that we have. All these other things are capabilities that we anticipate using under this IDIQ, but there's not currently the requirement hard and fast to do them.
I understand. I'm just saying there has to be a method of
and there may need to be some kind of a task order that comes out for implementing the protocols or something like that for when we move into those new types of inspections. I mean, that's something.
I mean, start up on those HQS QCs. Everybody knows here that 80% of the activity out there is still on paper. You know, tons of storage rooms. So you're saying you could be qualified inspector and a scanner, and you're in business.
Right.
No, we're not. From transferring your information to us would be electronic. So you can't send us a.
Who's electronic? I mean, you're talking 52580.
Yes.
So it would be a PDF form?
No, we will be looking at a web
Okay.
XML transfer
All right. So,
format.
but it doesn't exist now.
Each contractor would have to get their data in the same format.
Right. And we're learning the same. The GP&A and everything else is working.
Yes, so we would
Okay,
have
but
to
I
have
mean,
it
it
in
doesn't exist now. I mean, there's no current.
No, but we
Okay.
would be expecting it in a format that would be.
Okay, but I'm saying on the inspection side, it's the same thing. They're filling out a 52580.
And that will have to be transposed into a way that we could pull that information line by line, be able to read your results, and so on from machine readable form.
Okay,
It
so
couldn't be
you
a
are
PDF.
saying we need some IT on our end to develop that input device, that
Yes.
front end device?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there's a number of stages and different formats.
Yes, so you will be pulling down the information electronically from us and transmitting it back.
Thank you.
Josh Millsaps, this is just a comment again, and it seems like there's a lot of consternation on the stand-up of the IT component and even some discussion of, you know, subsidizing the build-out. And there are commercially available packages that do this. XML transfer is something that's done all the time, all over government. And given the way that you've talked about developing and delivering this as an IDIQ, it would seem that would be something that could, because there are COTS capabilities out there, that would just be priced into whatever comes out. You know, you're going to say, give us 500 of these, and that capability would just be priced into it, isn't it? Is that how?
I mean, I think that's kind of how we envision it, and that's what we're trying to make sure that the way we're thinking about it is really how it would work on your side of it, because a lot of times we think things work one way, and they may not necessarily be that as easy as it seems to us, or that capacity. So we have that minimum guarantee. So in order to do that, it may be a part of that minimum initially that says, you know, the first task order is to get that initial component of being the data transfer component established and moving with that. And that's why I was trying to get some sort of a number idea of what you would think that would be. And maybe that might be something that would come out into the RFI or something.
I would think that would.
Can you move forward a little bit?
I'm sorry. I would think that would be a part of, you know, if it's a COTS package, that would be part of what that vendor would provide to whoever the person is that's doing the inspections. When you purchase that should, I know, you know, for an inspection package, that should be a part of it.
Yes, I mean, that's what I'm envisaging, is that you wouldn't be developing your own, you'd be using, you know, the equivalent of Quicken Books, or you'd be using the equivalent of that sort of software as part of your, to be able to transfer information between us and you.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
On the HQS inspections, being that's 100%, would it be assigned by agency? So the task order would be for go do Detroit's HQS inspections, being that's 8,000, that would take an entire year because you're not doing the scheduling. So that task order would be for the full year?
No, and great question. Once again, we're doing a survey. So take Detroit, having spent 2 years there, I'm pretty familiar with that program. Let's say they've got 6,000 units. We would ask you to do a sample of perhaps 200. In other words, a specific number that we would anticipate would be their volume for a particular time period, because remember, you're shadowing. So you're not going in to do unique inspections, you're shadowing them, and we have to realize that time is money, et cetera, et cetera. So it'll be a sample to give us enough of an idea how well they're doing, and that's it.
And so we wouldn't actually get addresses at that point. We just, the next 200 inspections over the next 90 days. And then we contact Detroit to see what 200 they're doing in the
Bingo.
next 90 days.
Right, we're following their schedule, shadowing. Yes, sir.
Yes, knowing that we're at the early stages of the solicitation, is it possible you can sort of give us a timeline when the final RFP might come out and what the anticipated award date? Is this something that will happen this fiscal year, or are we looking at next fiscal year?
It will come out someday. No, so we anticipate
Is there a
it being.
song that goes with that, Joel?
Yeah. So we anticipate it being this fiscal year. We have requirements to do those HQS inspections this fiscal year. So we're trying to get through this process and be able to at least do those, if possible, under this umbrella of the IDIQs. The federal fiscal, so before end of September, right?
This year.
Not next January, October. So we anticipate it being out sometime this year, hopefully within the next couple months. Again, we're still trying to talk through whether we need to go back out after going through and kind of going through the comments and the interactions that we've had here. If we feel like we need to revise the performance work statement that everybody saw that was posted, and go back out for another RFI and kind of ask for a little more feedback as we've kind of fine-tuned it, and then look at the responses that we get and ensure that we're all on the same page from this and from that, and then we'll be able to move forward. So I would love to be able to tell you when that's gonna happen, but there's a lot of things that are kind of up in the air right now that we're still trying to work out and ensure that we're all industry and us, HUD, are all on the same page, because we don't want to put something out that's going to cause more questions than it is going to give us solutions. So we want to make sure that everybody's kind of talking together on this.
Yes, sir.
Not so much a question as a comment. One of the great things about having this group of people in this room is that there's people from different industries with completely different perspectives.
Right.
But that's also one of the problems, is that some of us don't understand what the others do. The HQS thing, I'm following up thinking, so we're expected to price inspections, let's say in Detroit, per inspection, without knowing if that inspector that we're following is going to do 10 inspections that day, or 20, or if, because we show up, as Mr. Holcomb and Mr. Maxon and Mr. Arcara can attest, inspectors behave very differently with QA reps present. So it makes it kind of an unknown quantity for us to bid.
It's a very good point, and we will be doing a lot of initial surveying so that you will know as much of that as possible. We ask them now, we did this before, what is your normal daily output? What are you doing? Yes, we understand that when the policeman is sitting behind you, you probably drive the speed limit. We got that. But they also understand that they are getting paid to get theirs done, and they can't allow a backlog because they have a requirement. Once they have that scheduled inspection under a recertification or an initial, it's got to be done within a certain time period, or they can't collect any money for the unit. So there's a lot of compelling forces. We can tell you what to anticipate, how many in a given time period based upon their capability, and we will provide that so that you can do a better job of a cost estimate. So if you thought it was going to be 50 in a week and it's 50 in a year, then obviously we got a problem. So yeah, we got to give you that so you can price it right. Okay? Any other questions, comments? Well, great conversation. and we really are looking forward to moving on this. I am going to keep the pressure up as the operator like you can't believe. We've got a great partnership with Joel and the folks in Denver to help us get there and do this in the right way. We really need your input. To remind you, if you don't want to share the fact you were here, put your name or your initial next to your name and we will not share it. Otherwise, please do. We'll share all of the contacts. We're going to be coming back out based upon the input of this meeting and anything else with what we believe to be a more accurate requirement. And then we will be moving from that, but it's really important that we get started much sooner than later, and the first tranche will be HQS inspections, as the last couple conversations have been about. We have another question or comment? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just, I was going to let this go, but, you know, since we're dealing with the Real Estate Assessment Center and the big conflict of interest rulings regarding REAC certified inspectors, is that going to be thrown out the window? When you're talking about if we have a guy who's a REAC certified inspector, he's going to be doing UPCS or a tax credit on one side in a particular jurisdiction, and he's doing consulting work like data collection for GP&As or energy audits for the same housing authority. Can we say, trust us and throw that out?
It's a great question, and for those that might not be familiar,
because that's going to happen a lot.
It does, and you know, we have to work through it. So what happens in the marketplace, we have 140-something, 150 inspectors. Some folks do a minimum of inspections to say current and certified with us, and then spend a majority of their time providing consulting services to housing authorities on how to be successful in passing the inspection. The marketplace, we understand that. At the same time, we're taking a good look at it right now because we have to make sure that the people doing the inspections also remain current. We're going to be looking at the threshold of the number that individuals have to do every given year. Now, I'm speaking to reverse auction and only reverse auction because remember the whole dynamic changes with the IDIQ. The companies that are on the list of the IDIQ bear total responsibility for the quality of the inspection. If the entity being inspected wants to go out and buy the services of how to do well, God bless them, this is America, and they have the right to do that. However, the individuals providing that can in no way guarantee the outcome should they choose to or should they not. Our role is to make sure that the individuals doing the government inspection are qualified to be doing that under reverse auction, and your role under the IDIQ is to make sure the individuals doing the inspection are qualified to do that. We're not going to step in the domain of telling individuals being inspected, be it White House, be it whatever, you can't have a consultant help you. That would never be on our radar, and we don't intend to ever do that. And hence, I can understand what you're saying from a conflict of interest perspective, but, you know, we've had criminal endeavors, we've had other things that have popped up in that regard. Individuals that buy that service do it at their own risk, and that's kind of basically the way we have to look at it. And I don't know if I helped or hindered or confused, but that's the world we live in.
No, I think that the approach is different. I'm talking about an individual. And if he's working on a contract for a housing authority, which is a government entity, as HUD is, and he's doing data collection on an energy audit, can he, with 2 months later, go and do the HQS quality control inspections under the contractor's purview?
And who's responsible for the quality of the inspection and the ones we're talking about in the future?
The contractor.
Bingo.
And that's where, we'll leave it at that.
That's where it goes.
So I just want to say a couple things before we close out. Just I want to clarify and make sure everybody's aware that, you know, the way that we're going to look at for the final solicitation and the evaluation criteria will go out in this. This is just open dialogue, market research, so don't form any final opinions. And there may even be another RFI that comes out soon to discuss any other questions or concerns or changes that we made to get a little more feedback from you. And the other thing is we'll probably still be here hanging out in the room once we finish for a little while. So, I mean, I'm happy to talk to anybody, but none of us will answer any questions because we want to keep everybody on a level playing field. So if you have any questions, ask them now. otherwise, we'll be happy to say hi. If I don't know if DJ or anybody else has to leave or anything. I don't have to go anywhere. So I'll be happy to say hi, shake your hand, put a face with a name and stuff like that. But we won't be answering any other questions once the forum is closed for this, okay? And that this webcast was recorded, so we'll send out the link for it, and if the link changes for some reason, then we'll send out a link so that you can go back and view it if you want to sit through 3 hours of fun and excitement again. Go for it.
If you're having trouble sleeping, be sure to just turn that bad boy on, and there you will be.
So it will be available if something came up, or if there's a part that you don't quite remember, or you can't read your handwriting. That's why I always type everything. Then it'll be available for you to go back and view it at a different time. And that's all I really have.
Thank you, Joel. So, one last time, is there anybody that has questions for all of us? Because we heard the rules from the Empire. They have to be questions, all of us here. And from that point on, you'll be communicating primarily with Joel for specific questions, but we do want your comments because we want to put out the best product we can as we look forward to putting out this.
See, I knew there would be somebody that was planning on asking me a question when nobody was.
Something pretty simple. I understand that you can't answer questions that may give one of us an advantage.
Right.
Is it necessary for comments that we would like to share with you to be public record for everyone else, or are we welcome to send you unsolicited suggestions?
So you can send me things if you want. I can't guarantee that I will read them or use them or anything. No, I mean, I'll look at them, but in all likelihood, I would prefer if you email them to me if you have anything, because that way, if I do need to use it, then it's easier for me to not misquote you or anything. So if you have anything else that you would like to say after the fact, feel free to email me, and then that way, if I need to publish it, I can. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that works. So that's a good caveat. I will answer and respond to emails, and then that way, if there needs to be some kind of response that everybody can see, I can use that or put it into any RFI or solicitation or anything that we do like that. Anything else?
Thank you all very much for being here, and we look forward to moving forward.
Okay, thanks.